Well, let's get more now. We can cross to Beirut and speak to Haneen Al Sayed, who is Lebanon's Minister of Social Affairs. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, Minister. Lebanon has had a tumultuous decade. A lot has happened. There was the financial turmoil. There's been the Syrian refugee crisis. We just had the 5-year anniversary of the port explosion earlier on this month. Then there was Israel's military operations in Lebanon. Does it feel now like Lebanon has turned the corner and is rising from the ashes?
Thank you, Tom. Yes, indeed. I believe Lebanon is rising from the ashes, as you put it, starting with the election of a new president earlier this year. Then, of course, a new prime minister, a cabinet formation, which actually took place at almost record unprecedented speed, a cabinet which is very coherent. Both the president and the prime minister's speeches were historic. And as you know, of course, also this cabinet took some historic decisions a few weeks ago. Each minister, including myself, have been working 24/24 on our different files. I believe the citizens of Lebanon have very high expectations, and rightly so. They have come from, as you mentioned, multiple crises over the past few years. So it's time now really to be as responsive to our citizens and within the context of the changes, of course, that are happening in the region, put Lebanon first and do the work that needed to have been done years, if not decades ago.
All of what you're saying is making me feel like we're off to an optimistic start with this discussion. And as Minister for Social Affairs, I'm assuming you've got a major role in rebuilding the country, because on social fronts there is so much that needs to be done. What would you say are your top priorities, and how's the progress?
So, unfortunately, Lebanon, because of the multiple crises that you mentioned, we're now facing very high poverty rates, increasing poverty rates that have doubled and tripled over the last 10 years. So this is a big challenge, and one of my priorities, of course, is to reduce the poverty. In fact, I have been talking about zero poverty. Now, we know this is highly aspirational. However, I think it's important to put that out there as an objective of our government. Part of, or one of the ways to address poverty reduction is through a robust, effective, equitable social protection system, which is exactly what my ministry's mandate is, to have a universal social protection which is rights-based and which offers citizens, if not talking about each of them is to have universal service, but they should be able to access different kind of social protection services at different parts of their life cycle where they need it. So this is really at the heart of, this is the priority of my ministry. So to provide the Lebanese citizen with as much protection as possible. At the heart of this, of course, is a social assistance program. Already we are implementing it. We are reaching 20% of the Lebanese population through a program we call Aman, a cash transfer program, which provides monthly support to families which are under the extreme poverty line. But there's other, of course, very important categories of society which need support and which have been impacted heavily by the multiple crises that have hit Lebanon. These are people with disabilities. We've had an increase in, of course, injuries that have, whether it be from the port of Beirut, from the previous, from the most recent war, and this is a group of population which is highly vulnerable, which is in need for government support. Elderly. Lebanon is one of the fastest growing aging societies in the region due to multiple issues, of course, related partly to stop migration, the very fast brain drain, but to a natural aging of the population. That's another priority for my ministry. Of course, at the same time, there is the very big challenge of the presence of a very large number of displaced Syrians who have been in Lebanon for 14 years and which have, despite international support, which has been generous, but it is decreasing, and this has become very difficult for Lebanon to be able to carry that responsibility and cost, if you will. So there's multiple challenges, all of which are priorities for the Ministry of Social Affairs. And yet we are working at each of these files to ensure that we can provide the best service to the citizens.
Thank you, Minister. And, and I'm going to ask you in a moment about Syrian refugees. But before that, I just want to cast our minds back a year. I was reading an article, and I'm triggered by what you were saying there with regards to the brain drain. And this article talked about a lost generation in Lebanon, a generation lost to some of the things you mentioned there: poverty, socioeconomic disintegration. At the time, the article said 1.2 million people were displaced by violence in Lebanon. It said that tens of thousands of buildings were destroyed. Unemployment, it said, was around the 30% mark. Food poverty in some areas. GDP, it said, had shrunk around 38% between the years 2019 and 2024. I mean, how much of those metrics changed these last 12 months?
So I think there is a change. Of course, the 1.2 million displaced that you mentioned, these were the first impact of the war, the last war in Lebanon. But almost within 48 hours after the war ended or stopped, let's say, or the hostilities stopped, let's put it that way, about 1 million went back to their place of origin or neighboring areas. And so we still have a problem, however, of displacement. And I've just announced recently a program for the IDPs, internally displaced persons, Lebanese, who are still displaced from their homes as a result of the recent war. So this remains a challenge, but it's been sized down considerably, and we are addressing it. Many of the other issues that you've mentioned about GDP, decline and poverty increase and high unemployment, of course, these are structural issues that we need to address, and we are addressing them through reforms. The government statement, upon which we got the vote of confidence from Parliament, was very clear about the kind of reforms that are needed. Essentially, we need to get the economy growing again. We are at a much lower base or size than we should be. And that's going to require a lot of reforms on the banking side, of course, on the fiscal side, on electricity, internet. So there's a whole basket of reforms, but this government is working on them day and night. Every minister, as I mentioned earlier, has been spending his or her time on these files. And with the leadership of the Prime Minister, we have made a lot of advances. Judicial reform, as you know, we've passed also the law for independent judiciary. So I think that with this kind of progress, we hope that some of these metrics you mentioned will start to turn around. Already we are potentially seeing a 5% growth in the second half of 2025. Tourism was very positive this summer. Still not over, and we're expecting good returns. We have indicators from supermarket sales, for example. These are also up. So many indicators that we have at a micro level are coming together, are indicating that we are starting to turn from that curve or from that bent that we have been at for years now.
Okay, and with regard to the brain drain that you mentioned yourself, and this time a year ago again, young people were feeling like they had no choice but to seek out a future in another country. They were leaving Lebanon. Are we starting to see that trend reversed? I mean, I don't know if you have any numbers for me, but anecdotally as well, do you get the impression that people are now stopping their mission to seek out their fortune elsewhere?
I can tell you from some personal experiences of children of friends who are in their early 20s, some of whom already have come back. They've been studying outside, and they've come back, and they want to set up here. They want to do startups. They want to engage. Now, this is anecdotal. We don't have major numbers on return on brain gain, but I believe just from feeling it, and also those who have not come back, but there's many aspire that when they finish their education outside, they want to come back. Look, Lebanon is a beautiful country, and not just because I'm Lebanese, but because it offers a lot. Now, if we can ensure security in all its forms, which is something, of course, which we are working on as a government, if we can ensure, of course, decent jobs, in the end, this is what the youth want, our jobs. And bit by bit, as we undertake these reforms, we can start to see the private sector picking up, because in the end, it's the private sector that has to create these jobs. And this is we're starting to feel that. And then, of course, good education, which we are also proud to have still, nevertheless, despite some of the setbacks of the last few years, which not just Lebanon had in terms of education, but globally because of COVID and other reasons. So I think once we start getting these basic elements back, we will see increasingly the youth who want to aspire to come back. Myself in the Ministry of Social Affairs, we have programs for the youth, and they are very active, very inspired. So we hope that, and we're already starting to see some of this change happening, that this ball will start to get bigger and bigger as we roll out more of the reforms that we plan to do. And don't forget, our government has been here now barely 7 months, and what we have achieved in 7 months have not been achieved in 7 years or more in Lebanon.
Sure. I mean, you have huge challenges, and as you say, you haven't had very long to address them. I wanted to ask you about Syrian refugees in Lebanon. Today, we saw pictures of refugees leaving Lebanon today. At one point, there were 700,000 registered Syrian refugees in Lebanon, but some people said the number was more like double or triple that number. I just want to ask you, what sort of numbers are leaving, and what does it mean for Lebanon if they are leaving?
So, thank you for this question. Again, this is one of the files, if you will, that our government has achieved very good progress, despite all the challenges. If we take a UNHCR number of 1.5 million, and there's different views, but let's just take the official number of UNHCR of 1.5 million Syrian displaced or refugees, whichever name you want to use, in Lebanon. By UNHCR's numbers, 170,000, roughly, cases have been deactivated from their database, i.e. have returned and have been literally deactivated. And another 71,000 are waiting for the process of going back. So we are saying about within barely 2-3 months of our government's approval of a return plan, we're seeing almost 250,000 refugees going back. And I myself was in some of these settlements, informal tentative settlements in the Bekaa area 3 weeks ago, and I was surprised, but many of those camps have been vacated. And I talked to some of the people that were still lingering around. Many are expecting also to go back. Now, as you know, our government has put in place what's called a return plan, which includes financial incentives and also waivers for fines. We worked this out with the UNHCR and with the international community, who is supporting us financially in implementing this plan. We have very good cooperation with the UNHCR and IOM in terms of data exchange, in terms of logistics. We want more. We hope that there will be, this return will accelerate. Now, for sure, the Lebanese economy needs foreign labor, including Syrian labor, and this is where we are working to also what's called organizing the labor market so that we identify our needs, whether it be in agriculture and construction or other areas of the economy, and we then formalize those workers through work permits and the like, so that this way we have what Lebanon needs in terms of labor force, is provided. At the same time, the Syrian families can go back safely and with dignity back to their country.
Sure. It's been a very busy day in Lebanon today. A big delegation is in town, meeting with President Joseph Aoun. You've got the U.S. Special Envoy for Syria and Lebanon, Thomas Barak, accompanied by Morgan Ortagus. We've heard from Thomas Barak that the country is going to come up with a plan to get Hezbollah to disarm. And I'm wondering whether your understanding of that plan could include the use of force.
So, as you know, in our cabinet meeting earlier this month, we took the very historic and brave decision as a cabinet to where we put a somewhat of a timeline that would facilitate and sort of the boundaries or the borders of where Lebanon needs to be in terms of arms, so that the bottom line being that all arms should be in the hands of the state, including those of Hezbollah. And we tasked the army to come up with an actual plan. Now, the army has been working very diligently on this. We are expecting a cabinet meeting on September 2nd, where the plan will be presented to us. We will discuss it, and that will be the moment really to have for us to have a look at it as ministers and see where we can go with this. Personally, I believe force is not the answer. We want to have cooperation on this from all groups, just like what started to happen with the Palestinian camp last week. So this is where the role of diplomacy and also building dialogue across groups, and this is something that my ministry also is planning to work on, build the social cohesion, bringing people into the state who have been out of the state for not just years, for decades, and to show them that the state is there for them. In the end, the state is the only answer to make all Lebanese citizens of all confessions and all political groups to make them feel safe, to bring them jobs, decent education. So this is really ultimately the objective, and I think nobody can say no to this. I'm not underestimating the difficulty in getting there, but I have confidence in the Lebanese people, and I believe we will get there bit by bit, and as we sort of take these steps, build the consensus, and hopefully we'll really have a much more prosperous country for everyone.
And Minister, one of the other things that came out of the meetings in Beirut today was this plan for an economic zone in the south of Lebanon. I think the thinking there is that will provide job opportunities for people who otherwise might want to join or remain in the ranks of Hezbollah. That's going to be partially funded by Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Just tell us what sort of news, what does that represent for Lebanon? Is that welcome news, and what impact might that have?
I mean, let me just say that creating jobs for our youth is our priority. How and the like is, of course, a government strategy. This is part of what we as a government are putting together. This is not to be dictated from the outside. Now, of course, we seek the help of our friends, especially in the Gulf countries, and hope that we would have, already we have a very good cooperation, and we hope that this will increase. But absolutely, creating jobs for our youth is important. And all over the country, I was in the north recently, in a city like Tripoli, where unemployment rate is very high, and yet there's many skilled youth in digital and AI and the like, which are looking for jobs. So, as I mentioned earlier, most important thing is to create an environment where private sector can come in and invest in Lebanon.
Another piece of news out of Beirut today, hot off the press, the former central bank governor Riyad Salameh is going to be released on bail of more than $20 million US. What do you think is going to happen to him? What should happen to him?
Well, I think a lot of people believe that justice needs to be served. those responsible for the financial crises, of whom the former governor of the central bank, of course, has a big responsibility. He's not alone, but he is obviously a very responsible, was in the midst of the whole financial engineering and, let's just say, bad governance that brought Lebanon to where it is. So it was news to me as much as it was news to everyone else, and I think we're waiting to understand, what's behind that and the reasons. But absolutely was a surprise. Let me put it that way, at least for me.
And just lastly, to wrap up this conversation, I mean, when you see the sorts of people who've been in Beirut just today, and these announcements with funding from the GCC countries, close allies, it looks like the Arab world, indeed the whole world, wants to see Lebanon succeed. There is an enormous amount of goodwill and support for your country. What's your vision for the next 10 years? Are you optimistic?
Yes, Tom, I am optimistic. The Lebanese people need just a little bit of stability and can bounce up. We've actually seen it throughout the last decade. Whenever there's some peace and quiet, let's put it that way, the economy picks up. The Lebanese are, I hate to use the term, but they are resilient. And with the basic economic reforms that we're putting in place, institutional reforms, security reforms, financial reforms, economic reforms, social reforms, human capital reforms, I'm very confident that within 10 years you will see that Lebanon has gained back its economic power as it is for a country of its size, and is growing at a very good rate. And our youth will be back. We'll be exporting knowledge and technology. And this is really what I think the Lebanese people and the youth wish for Lebanon. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I am optimistic about this, and hopefully just what we've achieved in the past 7 months compared to what's been achieved in the past years, at that rate, we will hopefully be at a much better place in 10 years, if not before that.
And just lastly, I mean, I'm wondering whether there are any parallels with any other female political figures whom you might see as role models. And I'm listening to you and thinking of the words of prime ministers in my childhood, like Margaret Thatcher, who said, if you want something said, you ask a man, but if you want it done, you ask a woman. And I'm just wondering whether, as a woman in this job of Minister for Social Affairs, you bring something to the table, something special, something additional.
I certainly think so. First, specific in the area of social affairs, I do believe it takes a woman to get this job done. With all due respect, of course, of predecessors who have male ministers, but there's a certain maybe passion that we might have for this kind of work. But I do believe that Lebanon is on this path of actually having a better gender balance. We're way behind other countries, including in the region, in terms of female representation in political sphere. I'm hoping that this will be with the 5 ministers that are in the current cabinet of Prime Minister Salam. Next cabinet will be maybe double that number. And I do believe female ministers do make a difference. We also become role models for for women and girls in society, that you can achieve just as much as any male minister.
All right, or arguably even more. Thank you very much indeed. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. You've been very generous with your time. Haneen Al Sayed, Lebanon's Minister for Social Affairs. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tom.